Hi, Sparkles. This is episode 145 of the Intuitive Wisdom podcast. Today, I am sharing my conversation with confidence coach Eimear Zone. She has 2 books available, The Little Book of Good Enough and Choose You. We talk today in our conversation about taming your inner tyrant, the invisible waiting room, being conditioned out of feeling good enough, as well as the flip side, confidence and self-acceptance. If you're ready to remember how powerful you are and learn to feel at home within yourself, this is for you. Hi, and welcome to Intuitive Wisdom. I am your host, K. Margaret Solorio. I am an author, spiritual teacher, and certified angel Reiki master. I believe that all the answers you seek are inside you. When you learn to discern between the ego and the intuition, tune into spirit, you can hear that whisper, your intuitive wisdom, answering your questions and showing you the next right step. On this podcast, we explore that connection and the good that happens in the world when you learn to hear your intuition, trust your intuitive wisdom, and allow your magic. Okay, Sparkles, quick announcements before we get to the interview. My book is available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback versions right now. Bonuses are available on the website. Once you purchase, you can download those. The book's called Make Ease Your Vibe, or you can search for my name, K. Margaret Solorio. I would love your support. If you also leave a review, that would be great. It's really a heartfelt project I'm so excited to share with you. It's what I've learned the past few years and a lot of what we talk about here, mindset, energy, and also time strategies to help bring that calm into the chaos of your day. So this month in our community, the topic is divine feminine energy. We're exploring what that is, what it means, and what it means to feel connected to your own divine feminine energy. I'm also working on a special series for the podcast for May with short daily episodes on meditation and connection. More details to come. Feel free to start getting excited. More information and to get your book bonuses or your free meditation that I've created for you, go to my website at deliciousease.com. All right, let's get to the interview. Eimear Zone is a certified confidence coach. She trained with the internationally renowned coaching school, IPEC, Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, gaining her professional certification in 2019. She further enhanced her coaching credentials through graduate certification programs as an Eli Master Practitioner and Core Dynamics Specialist. In 2021, she was certified PCC by the International Coaching Federation. She's the author of The Little Book of Good Enough, published in 2018, and currently lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico with her husband and 3 children. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Eimear. Well, Eimear, welcome again. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for the invitation. It's lovely to be here.
I'm very excited. Well, as you may know, on this podcast, I like to explore the magic that happens when you learn to hear and trust your intuitive wisdom. So I was curious for you, what does your intuitive wisdom feel like?
I think it's that quiet, grounded voice within. It's that sense of inner knowing that you touch into that lays beneath fear or expectation of others, or self-doubt. And it feels like home. I think it feels like home.
Oh, that's a beautiful way of describing it. And I love the visualization of having it layered underneath. I think for me, it's it's being a quiet, subtle voice, but that's another way kind of saying the same thing. And I used to always want something to feel right. And then I realized for me, it's a bit of a whisper. I need to hear that whisper.
And we have to be quiet. We have to be able to be quiet to tune in and hear it.
That's a really good point, too. Well, we were just talking before I pushed record that you have a new book out, but I was also excited to talk about your first book, the title of which is The Little Book of Good Enough, which I love that title. What do you think makes us feel like we're not good enough to take action, to speak up, to go for our dreams, or just in general?
Yeah, I think we're conditioned out of it, really. And I was thinking about this when I was thinking about having this conversation with you, and I was reminded of, the famous quote by Picasso about as children, all children are born artists, and the challenge is to remain one as we grow up and into an adult. And I think that is the same challenge of being enough and worthy that we have to hold on to as we get into adulthood. And there's also this, I don't know whether you've seen this amazing TED Talk. It may be one of the most viewed TED Talks ever, by a gentleman. I'm trying to remember his name now, which would be helpful. Ken Robinson, Sir Ken Robinson. And he's an English educator. And he died a few years ago now, but he had this TED Talk which was called Our Schools Killing Creativity. And it was really about how we're educated out of our creativity. And in schools, when you think about it, you know, we often demonize mistakes or stigmatize mistakes. It's the worst thing that you can make. And if you think about how we're conditioned, how we're educated, and think about our level of confidence, I think particularly girls, their confidence begins to dip at the age of like 8, 9.
Goodness.
I think we're educated and conditioned out of our natural sense of self-worth and being enough and our confidence. So lots of things at play, but I think our natural state is, just like Picasso said, as artists, that we're naturally confident, but we lose it. But it still belongs to us. So it really is a journey of reclaiming what is already ours.
Yeah, remembering and knowing. Yeah, I resonate with a lot of what you said, though I have children of my own, so now of course I fear they're at school right now. But it is interesting that it's almost like we forget to please ourselves because we're denying our confidence then in order to fit into the other rules to please the other systems. And forgetting that, I feel, for me, creativity feels like such a pleasure and such a pure expression of your spirit. Mm-hmm. And we forget maybe that joy is a good thing. Do you ever read, reminds me of what is it? It's the Dr. Seuss book, One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, I think. And at the end, do have fun. Fun is good. And I remember the first time I read that to my kids, it irked me the wrong way because I was just so conditioned. I was like, well, fun's not productive. Fun's not, like, all these alarms were going off in my head. And now, of course, when I read it, and I've done years of personal development, I'm like, oh, right. Fun is the answer. If you're headed in that direction, you're on to something.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a coming home to some of these things that we knew when we were very young. And then we learned to doubt them as we went through, you know, those ages and stages. And we're both parents. I have a 17-year-old is my youngest now, and I have 2 boys. And I'm telling you, it's a very different journey for a girl than a boy, because the messaging is very different that is given and received by boys and by girls. So that's a particular challenge that interests me, and particularly when you think about perfectionism, you know, that level of doubt. It feels like it's very productive, right? I have a daughter who's very interested in achieving and doing well, but that's very fragile, because if the grade doesn't land, what does it mean about me? Sort of worth is the scorecard, is the grade card. Is the college that you get accepted into, is the first job that you get when you graduate. And if your sense of self-worth, you can look very confident, you can be very productive and have lots of shiny, sparkly little awards around you. But inside, it's a different game, and it's very fragile. And that's not genuine, authentic confidence. That's seeking somebody else. Somebody else owns your worth then, really.
Yes, you're playing by somebody else's rules. Almost. That's what it feels like for me. You described much of my journey too. I really wanted to be successful, of course, when I was a kid. And I remember we moved between 6th and 7th grade, and it was a very big culture change. and it was a very big. The sixth grade was in an elementary school, and seventh grade in the new place was a middle school. So not only was the culture of the place different, but the environment of the school and the teaching and the conditioning was extreme. It was an extreme change. And I just remember, like you said, it was just drilled into me. Like, if you want to be okay, you need to do this. And I remember taking that and going, okay, of course I want to be okay. I have no clue what I'm doing here. And so I would go, and then the next year would be the same thing. And I remember going that way all the way through college and going, wait a second, how have I not questioned this in how many years? And I got to my first job, which was the expected, this giant corporate job that I got after college, and going, what on earth did I do? I said yes, 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 because I bought into that system, and it didn't get me where I thought. Like you said, there's the outside accolades and the inside happiness need to align. You've given me a lot to think about already, but I also wanted to ask you about the ego, because I've been reading a lot. I've been reading different books and thinking about the difference between the ego and the intuition. You refer to the ego and the egoic mind as the inner tyrant. So I'm curious, in all this, with confidence and self-doubt, how did you learn to tame your inner tyrant?
I think it's an ongoing process. And I think one of the most important things was realizing that that voice didn't belong to me, and that it was echoes of other people who I had just absorbed along the way. And then to begin to see when it was wrong. And one of the things that I did very early, and I put it in the very first book that I wrote, The Little Book of Good Enough, was writing this list of my top 10 things that I've achieved, that I've done well. And I think because the inner tyrant mind is always telling you what you're doing wrong, how you are less than, how you don't deserve, why you can't. And our minds, excuse me, are like, Velcro for the bad stuff and Teflon for the good stuff. So this list of top 10 was about counteracting that and saying, I need to see this reminder all the time that is the truth of who I am, what I'm capable of, what I've done. And then on the top of that piece of paper, I would have a favorite photograph of me looking happy and joyful and well. And because again, as a woman, I would look in the mirror and the inner tyrant would say, really, you're wearing that? Or you're doing your hair like that? Or you're getting a bit old? Or you're putting on some, constant in your physical form is like a great target for the inner tyrant. So I think that was one thing that I did very early on that helped me, and that I had it on a notice board. I had it on my phone. I had it as my screensaver on my computer. And it was just like, I'm going up against you, and I'm going to meet my inner cheerleader a lot more. They're going to counter that voice. And another thing that I do, I'm a runner, and I started running, I guess, in my 40s, and I'm 55 now, and I ran my first marathon after I turned 50. And I find that long distance running is a really nice time to welcome your inner tyrant, because it will say, well, what are you doing? You're tired already. You really think you're going to be able to run, 5 miles today? I don't think so. Why don't we just stop at the corner here? Just go home. So when you're in an endurance sport or any sort of physical endeavor, and your inner tyrant says, stop after 5 reps or stop at the end of the road, and you keep going, you are embodying the counter, this countermeasure, this huge forcefulness of, nah, you're lying. You're just storytelling, and I got a better story to tell. And I'm doing it with my whole self. So I think running for me has been a really big deal, because you have a long conversation with your inner tyrant, your inner critic, that negative voice within when you go for a run, because everything is saying at some point, stop, you can't. And, I'm not saying that you go beyond what you're naturally capable and what is safe and healthy for you to do,
Right.
but you do realize that your mind will tell you a big pack of lies about who you are and what you're capable of. And when you prove it wrong in that moment, feels pretty good. Feels
That's
pretty good.
absolutely fantastic. One, kudos for running marathons. I can't even imagine. I have, over the past year, developed a regular exercise pattern, though, and I get up in the morning and do that. And I always bank on the feeling afterwards and thinking, okay, I'm putting in the time for my health. I'll live better. I'll live longer. I'll have enough energy for the day. I know that if I put in the time, everything will go better. I just always enjoy it. But I never thought about the fact, and it happens every morning, that you're right. My inner critics, they're like, why don't you just put the weight down? So it's a little heavy. Or like, really, 20 seconds? Not that much. You don't have to keep going. It is a constant conversation in your head. That's completely right. I never thought about that as a win. I just thought of it as annoying. That's a really good point. Um, well, you talk about another concept that I appreciated too, called the invisible waiting room. I would love to hear more about that concept, how you use it, what do you think about it? Because I feel I spent a lot of my life waiting.
Yeah. I think I think it's maybe the first chapter in the book, Choose Yourself, that I wrote towards the end of last year. And it was really this feeling that I recognized. It came from my own story about when I moved unexpectedly, really, from a very settled life in the UK with 3 children and sort of landed in Miami in Florida. And I found myself pretty unhappy and not feeling very optimistic about life there, and just desperately getting in my own way, thinking that all the power was outside of me. And I realized that I could argue with myself and make everything everybody else's fault and responsibility, and that wouldn't do a damn bit of good for me, that it didn't change anything, and that I was going to be unhappy, that being right in inverted commas wasn't helpful. And I think the waiting room is really where dreams kind of go to die. And it is this invisible place where we put ourselves in a situation and we deny that we have the power to change it. And we always have the power to change it. And it can look like staying in a job for too long. It can look like, I'm just waiting for something. I'll just wait until New Year's Eve to, I don't know, stop drinking, stop smoking, go on the diet. We're constantly putting off what needs to change for us to live a better life to some external situation, trigger, circumstance that we imagine holds the power, instead of really choosing ourselves and saying, actually, this belongs to me, and taking ownership. And so it's a real sign. It can feel really comfy, and you can feel a lot of righteous indignation in your waiting room. But the interesting thing to do is to do a sort of projection into the future mental exercise and say, okay, what will it feel like if I am still here in this position in 5 years' time? And like, nobody's coming. There is no rescue committee. Like, we're grown-ups. And I think we forget how powerful we are. And the waiting room is really important to recognize when you're in one. And that really involves, being emotionally intelligent, being clear on what your values are, understanding how your mind works, and what we were talking about, the inner critic and the stories that our mind will tell us, and really knowing what we truly want from our life, our short time that we have on this planet. What is your heart's desire? What is it that you're here to create, and how are you here to serve? And to really identify that as something very magnetic and powerful that resonates for you. And when you do that work, the idea of not realizing that scares the hell out of you. Mm-hmm. And that's a real kick in the ass to get you out of your waiting room and start living fully.
I absolutely agree. I have definitely experienced that. And I realized when you were talking, I think I also told myself a story in the waiting room that it would just be. I don't know if that's from the movies or where I got that notion, but that I would somehow one day be in the waiting room and then the next day be full in my glory of my dreams, and not understanding or realizing that to get from point A to point B would be a journey. It wouldn't be an instant thing. So that I would have to change, and the circumstances would need to, like, there would be multiple steps of action and up-leveling and whatever you want to call it, but that there would be a time period. I used to get very frustrated in the waiting room thinking, well, you're behind, you're not doing what you thought you wanted to. Always feel this pressure of time. And then I realized, everything happens in divine timing when it needs to, but also this idea that to give yourself the time to grow, to meet your dreams, and develop those skills. Or like you said, when you do some of the inner work and then you realize you can give yourself a kick in the butt to get out, you have to do the inner work first. It doesn't just, like you said, you can't just wait around for somebody else to kick you out of your waiting room.
Yeah, it is about you can pause and do intentional work. It's not like, there's another thing that running has taught me, that life is a marathon. It's not a sprint. If we're like, take action, just keep doing things. But it needs to be intentional and meaningful, not just doing for doing's sake. Like, look busy. No.
Yes.
Do the right work.
I'm gonna. All right. So we've talked a lot about getting out. I feel like I would love to spend a little time talking about the flip side. So talking about confidence as the flip side of self-doubt, talking about self-acceptance, because you also I read on your blog that that's just such a powerful ally. We've talked about a little bit in hints of battling the inner critic, but I would love to hear your thoughts on confidence and on self-acceptance.
Yeah, I think confidence is really at its core allows us to project a positive outcome into an uncertain future. And when we do that, we can take action in pursuit of that. And we're not, we don't fall apart if things don't work out. I think that's where the self-acceptance comes in, that we're not defined by failure, that failure is just part of the journey, and it's interesting. And there's something to learn from. And we talked about that early conditioning where failure feels like it's fatal. I didn't get the A or whatever. So you have to unlearn that and realize that we are living in an unpredictable world. We're not living in school where, we get a gold star on our report card and that is the check in the box and all is well. We live in a more complex world where failure is a natural part of it. So for me, there's kind of like these two core strands of how you build confidence. And one of them is, the who I am and what I'm capable of beliefs, that knowing truly who you are. And that involves really a lot of work with that voice of the inner critic, which is these borrowed opinions of all these other people who told you who you should be or who you were. And so it is very much that journey of remembering, knowing clearly who you are, what you're capable of, and what you want from the world. And the other strand of that belief is really about the outcome expectation strand of belief, which is, if I do X, then Y is possible. If I take this brave action, then this positive outcome is possible. I have to believe it's possible. For me, when I go out and run and train, I have to believe that if I go out on these runs and I try and I show up, that it's possible for me to cross the finish line at 26.2 miles. So that gets me out the door. It is these two strands of belief, and they take action is a huge part of it. And people say that action builds confidence. Sort of, but it's not the magic formula. That's a bit like fake it till you make it, where people go out and they take action and they do the things and they can be very accomplished and very externally successful. And then they can be, alcoholics, they can be drug addicts, they can be addicted to food, they can be addicted to exercise, they cannot be at home in themselves because they are seeking the accomplishment to prove it to somebody else, and they're on somebody else's journey. Confidence is really being fully at home with yourself wherever you are and in pursuit of something meaningful, personally meaningful. And that is a big journey of sort of unlearning a lot of these things related to who I am and what I'm capable of, remembering to, that it's those things that have slipped away, Teflon for the good and Velcro for the bad, not to keep focusing on the bad. And a big part of how I help people is the underlying foundation of building this, what I call the confidence bridge, is mindfulness, a mindfulness practice, and taking back control of our attention, which has been hijacked. When you think about put down the weight, it's too heavy after 2 reps or 20 seconds. Your attention is what matters. Where will you put your attention now? And there was, I don't know whether you've ever read the book Hooked by a guy named Nir Ewald. He wrote this book called Hooked back in 2014. And oh my gosh, did Silicon Valley love him for it. It was all about how to build habit-forming products and brands. And every algorithm that is inundating you with messages is built on the back of that book, Hooked, because they all wanted him to come in and tell us how you do that. And so our attention has really been hijacked. And when your attention has been hijacked and you can't come in and find your center and your truth and give yourself the nourishing messages of who you are, what you're capable of, and instead you're constantly very scattered, you don't have that centered ability to be confident and to show up from what matters most in a really powerful way for you. He felt so bad about that book that in 2020 he wrote another one as the countermeasure to it called Indistractable, which was like, oh my gosh, all of this big marketing media machine has this powerful information that they're harnessing and like on rocket fuel to rob us of our ability to focus and pay attention. So here's how you gain it back. And there was lots of very sort of tactical measures about how you organize your desktop and stuff like that. But I think at the core, the most powerful way to reclaim your attention and your focus is through mindfulness, meditation practice, which I sort of weave into the work that I do.
I love that. And my goodness, there's so much there. I think one thing that stands out from what you said is feeling at home in yourself. Mm. And I had this image of having, like, a lot of times when we're afraid of failure, we think about safety nets. And if this doesn't work, what are we going to do next? And the conversation is usually very external. Like, if I take this risk and it doesn't work out, what's the next thing I could do to fill that hole? Instead of realizing you are your own safety net. Like, if your home is you, if you're comfortable, you're at home and with yourself, then for me, I can see that perspective that you were saying, that failure. I don't know if that you said failure would be fun, but it's interesting. That's what you said. It can be interesting. Like, you can appreciate its value for the learning experience or for the, I don't know what part of it, for the experience in general. And so then coming back to knowing that even if you do fail, you're not banking on some external something to pick you up. You're banking on yourself to pick yourself up and to keep growing and going.
And I think one of the things that come to mind as you said that, it's almost like you're learning to speak a different language because fear will tell you this story about failure. You'll feel nervous, right? When you're doing new things, even when they're very meaningful to you. Confidence isn't that you don't feel fear or that it suddenly feels comfortable and you just feel like Wonder Woman or you can just set the world on fire. It doesn't feel like that. Maybe for some people, 99.9% of us are feeling in our bodies emotions and sort of a nervous system that gets activated, ready to perform or do something scary and new. And when you bring mindfulness into play and you begin to really tune in, it's like you realize that signal, the old language that it was speaking was the negative spiral of you can't do it and why not? And it means all these negative things. With mindfulness, you learn a different language, about to perform, feeling ready, taking a deep breath, here to do important work, feeling good, ready to serve. You translate those physical signals into a language that serves you, because that really is the authentic language that your body, and we just have misinterpreted it, I think, oftentimes. Sometimes the threat is real, like don't jump off the mountain and go abseiling and not your thing. That would scare the hell out of me. That inner voice is going to be telling me all the right messages. But, if it's putting your voice out into the world, starting your podcast, learning, going for that promotion, making that change, going to live in a different country, listen in to the real knowing and truth and interpret those signals in a more positive way, I think serves us more deeply.
Amen. I think it's a very powerful message. Is there anything you would like to add today?
Really, I think that building confidence is really a key that unlocks so much inner power and prosperity for us, particularly women. And it's a worthy journey for all of us to go on, because the world needs more of us bringing, our many gifts into the world and being of deep service and contribution. And who are we to deny that? Staying in a waiting room is the way to come to the end of our lives with regret. And I don't want that for anybody.
Well put. Tell us the best place to connect with you and your work.
I'm mostly active on Instagram, and my handle is at Eimear Zone Coach. And I'm also obviously on my website, eimearzone.com.
Wonderful. And I'll, of course, include those links in the show notes below. Thank you again for joining me. I really appreciated this conversation.
Love being here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Hey, Sparkles. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Intuitive Wisdom Podcast. If you haven't already, click subscribe and follow. And if you love this episode, please leave a review and share it on Instagram and tag me at Delicious Ease. That's DELICIOUSEASE, so that I can say thank you. Every review helps another person find this podcast and learn to welcome their own intuitive wisdom. You can download your free 20-minute guided ideal day meditation on my website, deliciousease.com. Again, that's DELICIOUSEASE.com. And have you bought my book yet? Now available on Amazon, be sure to find my book, Make Ease Your Vibe, for mindset, energy, and time strategies that help you raise your vibration and enjoy the life you live. See you next week.